So welcome to today's Feeling Fit with FSHD. This is our twice a month series. It's held on Thursdays, the second and fourth Thursday of every month at noon Eastern Time. Without further ado, I will introduce Ulrike Uta, who is a physiotherapist at the Midlands Muscular Dystrophy Centre?
It's a new name now. It's called the Muscular Dystrophy Support Centre in Coventry, which is in the UK.
Okay, it's in the UK, and one of the founders and board members of that center is Ruth Hereford, who is a member of FSHD Society. And she has done something quite extraordinary. Well, the center has done something quite extraordinary, which is it is really focused on muscular dystrophy of the various types. So the physiotherapists who work there have the opportunity to work with dozens and dozens of patients with FSHD, which, as most of you know, is really rare. If you're lucky to find a physiotherapist who helps at all, they may have seen one or two. You may be the only FSHD patients they've ever seen. So, Ruth and I talk about maybe someday there could be a center like that set up in the U.S. or in several, major U.S. cities. It's set up as a nonprofit. It's supported through charitable donations, I think it's an incredible resource for people in the UK. So, and a resource for us globally, because we have Ulrike today, who has worked with so many people with FSHD and really familiar with many aspects of the issues you're having. So, Ulrike, I'll turn over the discussion to you.
Hello. Thank you very much, June. I think I would like to briefly talk about the Muscular Dystrophy Support Centre in Coventry, where I'm working, because I do think it's an extraordinary place. So I'm a neurophysiotherapist, and I have been a physiotherapist for 35 years, something like that, long time. And a good chunk of that time I have been specialized in working with adults with neurological conditions. And in all these years, I have only come across a handful of people with neuromuscular conditions, FSHD. And even so, I would have thought I'm an experienced neurophysio. It is a very niche area for physiotherapists to work in. So I have been with the charity for the past 8 years now. I'm one of the lead physios, and if we are looking into research, physiotherapy, rehab research for muscular dystrophies, there is actually only very vague guidance available. So we know that exercises are good, and we know that the really old thinking of preserving muscles by not exercising is actually not good. We know that moderate intensity is good. We know that flexibility is important and fitness is important, but this is sort of pretty much it. So in terms of treatment techniques, I think as a physio, it really comes down to experience it and experiencing working with people and building up a repertoire of what works and what doesn't work. So I'm feeling very fortunate working for the charity where we have funding to support people with adults with neuromuscular condition on a long-term basis. So we don't discharge people. Not everybody comes regularly. Sometimes people don't come for 6 months or a year or even longer, then come when things are changing. But for us as therapists, it means that we can firstly build up a relationship with our service users, but it also means that we really learn, we get more creative with our tool bag as physios. We get more creative in applying it with people. And so last week's session, I focused on, 2 weeks ago, last session, I focused in an exercise class working mostly on core stability and working on flexibility, range of movement, stretching exercises, especially for the middle. And I was talking a little bit beforehand about why this is important, and June just tapped a little bit into it again. So I'd like to recap and see if there are any questions around that. So with the FSHD, weakness in certain key muscles will develop, and because we just want to get on with our lives, we do. And so what our body does is develop certain areas which work harder to compensate for weakness. And as muscles or areas compensating, the weak muscles get a little bit the information that they don't have to work just as hard, because these compensatory mechanisms are kicking in quite well. And over time, posture changes more. And as the posture changes, it starts turning into a little bit of an aggravating circle, so that weaknesses can get aggravated, posture can cause discomfort, pain, things like cramps. Certain movements get more difficult, the legs can feel really heavy, or it takes more effort to do certain tasks. And then comes an element in of where fitness is going down a little bit, and that mixture of losing flexibility, losing strength, changing posture, losing fitness are then getting trickier to deal with. And the challenge for us, for me as a physio, is I can't take the FSHD away, I can't take the primary weakness away, but we can have a look at where we can actually change flexibility, where we can change tightness developing, overuse developing, and then have a look at if we can get weak muscles more active and a little bit more alert and engaged. And this was what I wanted to bring into the exercise class, really. So it was a lot about core stability, lots of pelvic tilts and weight transfers and shoulder girdle circles or shoulder girdle movements. And then a little bit of fitness in as well, and some flexibility. So now for today's session, that was me blubbing on now. So for today's session, I'm really quite open to how we do it. So if you have questions, there were some questions at the end of last session, but if something has popped up, or difficulties, or people weren't entirely clear, or just throw that at me and we can have a look at that. And if you would like to, we can visit some exercises, or we can do a whole little exercise program. So I'm quite open and flexible, and be guided by you, really. So, June, are you happy to look into the chat and see? I'm not super tech savvy.
Okay. I do see a question. How often would you suggest using the video? I think maybe the one last time to exercise. I'm not sure. It says between these sessions. I'm not quite sure which sessions. I guess maybe
I can explain. I'm sorry. When we did the last session, and one time in between, I went onto the video that you have on the YouTube, and I did it in between, and then now we're going for this section. So I was wondering, just wondering how often in between, should you do it 2 days on and 1 day off, or how would I gauge whether I'm doing it too often or not?
So generally, to say, there is no rule which fits everybody. because everybody's exercise level and fitness level will be different. Now, somebody who is very fit and mobile and does lots of other things as well might find that they would feel quite happy with doing something like we have done, half an hour exercise on a nearly daily basis. Whereas some people would feel that that would be way too much. So if I can expand a little bit, if we are thinking about, so generally exercises are great. And generally it would be good if you do some form of exercises every day. Now the question comes, or the trick is in the intensity. As a rule of the thumb, when you exercise, you should feel the day or the next 48 hours okay afterwards. If you exercise and you feel the next day or within 24, 48 hours absolutely exhausted, then you have done too much. When you exercise and you feel a little bit achy and you feel that you've actually done something, that's okay. That's acceptable. So if we are looking at what Muscular Dystrophy UK, which is the overhead charity, suggests, they've put together a really nice fact sheet about advice on exercising. And I really, really like that. So they're trying to pull as much information from research together. But as I explained at the beginning, it's very individual. And there is not very much precise research available. So one rule doesn't fit everybody. But generally, exercises which involve flexibility should be done up to 5 times a week. If you're looking more at strength training and you're pushing the boundaries to what you can do, then that should not be more than 3, maximum 4 days a week. If we are looking at just moving, that's something for every day. Every day we should all move. So if you have done the exercise class with me last time and you found that it was actually quite okay and quite easy and it wasn't bothering you and you felt good the same day, you felt well the next day, then you can do that type of class 3, 4, 5 days a week. And I would then generally say have 2 days a week off. Does that answer the question? I know that was a bit of a longer answer, but it's because things are never black and white and as straightforward.
That was a perfect answer.
Okay.
Because all those things are different, and I could feel that my muscles were moving differently after those exercises. I didn't feel exhausted, but I didn't know how much strength it was giving me, but probably not strength. So it was just basically flexibility that we were doing.
Yes, we weren't focusing on strength the last time. The reason for that is that when I do strengths with somebody who has weakness because of a muscular dystrophy underlying condition, I want to see how people do the movement. If I ask you to use a water bottle filled with, half a liter of water and to lift that, some people might do that in a beautiful pattern. Some people might do that whilst they're compensating big time. And for those people, it would be too much weight. So with gentle movement, flexibility, a little bit of fitness, this is where you can't do harm, I would say, unless you're getting excessive. Trying to do strength exercises and not activating the right muscles, but working into compensation can make you seriously hurt and has no benefit. So this is the reason why in an online class, I would not focus on strengths.
That's really great insight. By the way, everybody, if you know the reaction button, you can raise your hand and if you have a question, that will be helpful. And also you won't feel so shy about speaking up because you'll have your turn. I saw that Mike had a question about his main pain points. Do you want to share those?
Yes. Am I unmuted? I apologize.
Oh,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Historically, the largest single pain point for me has been in my neck and my shoulders. That existed. I've had both shoulders fused, but it existed prior, and the fusion really made a positive difference early on. But as over the years, as time has passed, I still have that neck and shoulder issue. And I don't know if it's common with other people or if it was covered 2 weeks ago or.
Yeah. With FSHD, neck and shoulder problems are very common. I would say that. And there is not one single cause. And why? Because there is not one single cause, there is not one single answer to it either. I would say there is the obvious weakness around the shoulder blades. But I would say that a lot of problems I see with shoulder and neck are more coming from weak core muscles and lack of postural stability. So the core muscles, being the muscles which connect the pelvis to the rib cage, so they form like a corset around.
Yep.
And they are important to stabilize the pelvis against the rib cage and the rib cage against the pelvis. In pretty much all my patients I see, the core muscles are not as active and not as strong as we want them to be. And what happens then is that the core muscles are key for keeping us up against gravity. If the core muscles not hold and we are up on our feet, there is too much movement between pelvis and rib cage. And this leads to that our body tries to find ways to stabilize that whole tower against gravity. And the prime muscles for doing that are the upper fibers of the trapezius muscle, which are just sitting here, which are on top of the shoulder,
Right.
and the neck muscles.
Yes.
So the back of the neck, chin poking out, back of the neck holding here, shoulders coming up. Those muscles are quite effective in keeping us up against gravity. And that, by the way, this is also then aggravated if you use walking aids, because then you're relying on the upper body holding you up even more. These muscles are really effective in holding us up against gravity, but unfortunately they're not designed to do that. And they cause a lot of pain. So shoulder girdle, neck pain, headaches, that whole thing can make sleeping difficult, can cause a whole bunch of things. Apart from that, it's not very good for us mentally if we are constantly in pain around the shoulder girdle. The solution to that, well, it's a little bit chipping away on the big problem. I would say the solution would be you need to find a therapist who works one-to-one with you. You need to look at getting the core as active as possible, getting your posture as good as possible, then need to have hands-on to loosen up that tight area. Lots of my patients, when I feel the shoulder girdle neck the first time, it feels rock solid. It just feels like a big block. And now if I'm coming there in an exercise and say, oh, you need to do this and that, they can't move because it's so solid. So this is where it's really useful to have somebody actually putting hands on and stretching and mobilizing the tissue. It's the muscle, it's the connective tissue. It's probably moving in the shoulder girdle as much as your fusion allows, but definitely neck movements as well. And then trying to get you into an as good posture from the shoulder girdle as possible, and then again go back to the core. So I often see that approach a little bit like an onion, because you can't start from the outside and go straight to the key of the problem. You sort of have to do layer for layer. So you have to start with one area, then go to the other area, go back again to the core, work the shoulder girdle again. Yeah, so this is this would be, sorry, it's not a short answer.
No.
But those are my thoughts to how to tackle the neck problem. It's not one exercise. It's not one easy solution. It's an onion, and you have to keep on peeling. And I think you probably will always be vulnerable to issues around the shoulder girdle neck. But the key is to find a way to manage it so that you can live your life without being in constant pain and being constantly hindered by it.
Is it, and I have to assume this is relatively common among FSH patients?
It is, yes. Yes.
But you're absolutely correct. Every time I see my physical medicine doctor, she always says, you have these big knots in the back of your neck. And
you can't change them just with 1 or 2 sessions. This is something where you need to think about a long-term plan to manage it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your input.
Okay.
You're quiet. June.
Am I quiet?
No, June was muted.
Oh, June is quiet, yes.
Chris has his hand up. Chris, you want to come off mute?
Yeah, it's actually a she, but that's all right. Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Hi there. I actually had written something in the chat as well, and it had to do with, what you were describing as how often to do the different exercises. I just started with a personal trainer last month, and I've been, I fatigue quicker than I feel my muscles getting sore. So I'll do the exercises to fatigue, and then the next day I'll be tired, but I'm not sore. And
yes.
So what does that look like? I mean,
yes. So fatigue can be, actually for quite a lot of people with neuromuscular conditions, quite a severe problem. And you do need to work within the fatigue level. So is it okay if I give a little bit of a longer answer about the fatigue side as well? Because it's never a quick answer, unfortunately. So there is fatigue, which is called primary fatigue, which is caused directly by a neuromuscular condition. And then there is what we call secondary fatigue, which is fatigue which comes through muscle weakness, deconditioning, pain, medication, lack of sleep. So there is a whole bunch of things which can aggravate fatigue. And if we're looking at fatigue, then it is useful to think about how am I sleeping? Are there certain activities which tire me out particularly? Am I able to manage them when I have a personal trainer session booked in? Would it be a good idea to have to plan my day accordingly? So to set you up from these secondary factors in the best possible way. We know that deconditioning, so that's the loss of fitness, basically, And the loss of stamina is a big contributing factor for fatigue. So when you're fatigued, I do want you to exercise very clearly. And the intensity of the exercise is dependent on how you feel afterwards. As I said earlier, when you exercise and you feel tired afterwards, and you might feel fatigued for the same evening that you say, I can't do anything anymore, but then you recover quickly again for the following day, then that's okay. If you feel that you exercise and then you are wiped out for 2 days afterwards, then it's too much. You're paying for a personal trainer, so that means you want to make the most out of your session as well. My suggestion would be, if you feel that a whole exercise session, whole active session with a personal trainer is a little bit too much, ask your personal trainer if you could work through stretches. Maybe stretches you can't do very easily by yourself, but where it is really useful to have somebody there to help you. And to do exercises maybe around the shoulder girdle or around the core, where it's really good to work a little bit more quietly, but working quite precisely with the personal trainer. So that you are not having just action and fitness orientated, but you're also working more on body awareness, on precision of movements. And maybe the personal trainer can help you to get muscles going by putting hands on and supporting you a little bit, which you couldn't find as easily by yourself.
Yeah, which has been, he actually has been working with somebody that has FSHD for a couple of years. So he's familiar with the disease. So that's been great, because he realizes the asymmetry of which all my muscles react differently on different sides, and no rhyme or reason. So that's been super helpful to have somebody that actually is familiar with the disease. But I'm curious, and you answered that well. I mean, I guess I'm in that growth stage where I'm trying to figure out what's going to be the right timing to do.
Yeah. The problem with fatigue is that fatigue is often variable. So what works well for 1 week might not work for the next week, purely because, firstly, it can be variable in itself, but then also your circumstances might have been just a little bit different. That the one day you haven't slept as well, for example, or you had all sorts of stress going on anyway, so that you're not going at your best into the session. I would say, it sounds like you've got a really good personal trainer. I would be talking with the personal trainer about how you're feeling at the beginning of each session, and maybe make a little bit of a plan of if it's a session which could be more active, but also integrate something which is not just as super active and asks a little bit less of you.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right. Other questions? Well, while you're thinking, I'm curious how many in the group today are experience the shoulder and neck issues. That you can raise your hand to let me, Right. Yeah, okay. That looks a lot of you. Are there other areas that you're concerned about? Lower, okay, I see Hillary. Okay, you can leave your hand up if you have another question. I think Jay and let's say JSCHW, I don't know who that is, but do you have a question? You can come off of mute. All right, maybe while you're figuring that out, Helen, looks like Helen has a question.
Okay, I raised this question at the end last month, and it had to do with getting whiplash, soft tissue injury as a result of a couple of accidents I was in, and that took way longer to heal, especially the second time. It was that one, the car was a write-off because it was a bigger van that it was a Canada Post van that hit me. But could you speak to that a little bit in terms of when you do get an injury like that? I just listening, if I'd have had this session to take to a physiotherapist and the massage therapist, I think it would have been great, because it would have really, especially for the physiotherapist, it would have really helped them, because I felt like they were, even though I said I got FSHD and I tried to explain it to them, their goals for me were set too high. And I think they pushed me, and it took longer to heal as a result. But you're talking about you're talking about being realistic about the limitations that we do have.
Yeah. Helen, as I said the last time, I'm not a musculoskeletal specialist, but after your question the last time, I spoke to a colleague of mine who is seeing patients with whiplash injuries more often, and he updated me on what the current thinking is on whiplash. So I'm trying to pull those things together. So the current thinking on whiplash is basically getting movement back in again. So it's not anymore about the collar and keeping everything still, but getting movement going. And I think you are absolutely right that it's about a goal setting. So the treatment in itself you receive from your therapists is probably not different because of the FSH. But it is about being more aware that you have already quite a lot of weakness around your shoulder girdle. So that means that even a small incident can actually have a bigger effect on you. Which means that the treatment probably needs to start in baby steps rather than following a normal program. The other thing I would say, which is really important, is that we generally, with muscle wasting conditions, even if we are able to train muscles, our time scale is much, 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 much longer than you would have with somebody who doesn't have a muscle wasting condition. As a rule of the thumb, our muscles are getting 4 times more quickly weak than we build them up. So if we have for 1 week an arm in a plaster, to get the arm going will take us 4 weeks instead of the 1 week only. It's took to deteriorate. Now, when we are talking muscle wasting condition, we are talking in months. And maybe, Helen, that was the problem you have encountered, that the therapists were trying to achieve too much in a too short of a time frame and didn't acknowledge that any build-up of normal movement, of recovery, will take a lot longer. That would be my guess what might have happened. And it's the mechanism of the whiplash, apart from that the weakness makes it more severe, is not different with FSHD, and the recovery in itself is not different, only that it takes longer and it goes in baby steps.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Helen?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And actually, the second accident that was worse, I went to a physiotherapist right away, but he was not that interested in treating me, really. He was quite young and he was more interested in jetting away every weekend and stuff. He was, so I went to a massage therapist, and she was actually very, very good. And I went for about a year, and then I realized this was taking longer. So and I was having problems with the insurance because it wasn't the normal insurance. It was a federal insurance program. And their head office, I think, is back east, and they lost my file, and so I did go to a lawyer, and he said, well, I think you should start back on physiotherapy. And I was actually thankful that I had gone to this massage therapist, because she listened to me, and she worked on a lot of the knots and everything. So I was more ready, I think, for the physio. I think if I'd have gone for that particular physiotherapist, it would have been longer to have recovered it. But I knew from the first time that I would recover, but it was going to take longer.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's excellent.
Thanks for sharing that.
Okay.
Sandra has patiently had her virtual hand up. What's your question, Sandra?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Sandra.
Okay. First of all, this is the first time I've joined this particular Zoom. I think you're brilliant. Your explanation of the shoulder issue is so apropos to me, and I see many others, and it made so much sense what you said. Now, if my question was answered in your last session, I'll be happy to listen, to go back and find it and listen to it. But my question is sort of related to the issue of the shoulders. You suggested that you work more on the core so that you don't need the shoulders to raise themselves up. So,
sort of. Yeah.
Right. But I'm curious if you have specific exercises for the core that would help strengthen it, or, so that it doesn't get worse, whatever.
Yeah. So, as I said earlier, I see it, there are always lots of different factors coming together. So, as keen as I am on the core work, unfortunately, I also can't say that work on the core and the shoulder issues are going away. So it's just not just as simple.
Now, I understand that, but my biggest problem is not even the shoulders, it is the core. Because I can walk, but I'm bent over completely.
Yes. So on the core, it really depends again on what your ability is. So the easy answer would say Pilates type style exercises. However, this is not just as easily done as said. So if I would see you one-to-one now, Sandra, I would have a look first how much mobility and how much activity you have. If you are in a very much of a forward pelvis with a very strong lower back lordosis, so that very strong curve, and you are super stiff there, then you probably would find it very, very difficult to activate your core muscles all by yourself. So you then probably would need some help to firstly loosen the back a little bit, and secondly, make you feel these core muscles in the first place. If you are actually able to tighten your tummy and you can feel how your tummy is working, now that is a lot easier then, because you already have the awareness. of what the core is doing. If you have the awareness, if you go back into the video, we started off, so it was a video in sitting, we started off with pelvic tilt, rolling the pelvis forwards and backwards, rolling the pelvis to the right and left, and then finding a middle position, trying to get that core active, getting the muscles to push you up so that your spine is starting to lengthen and you have that sense of growing tone. Now, those would be I would call them the basic core exercises. But as I said, if you are really stiff and you can't feel the core muscles, then they might be too difficult. If those seated exercises are no problem, you would probably be okay to join a beginner's Pilates class, where you are working on pelvic tilt, getting the core stable, switching the core muscles on, then holding that, starting moving an arm or a leg whilst you're holding the core muscles. And that can then be progressed to more and more complex and challenging exercises. So the idea is, firstly, I'd like you to feel your tummy muscles. I'd like you to be able to move the pelvis and to feel where is a middle position, where can you tighten the tummy muscles. And if you can do that, we would start introducing movements of arms and legs as well, and to see if you can hold that. Because at the end, when you're up on your feet, you want to have a stable core whilst you're walking, talking, making cups of tea. That's me. That's me coming from England. So you want to have your core working whilst you do your normal activities of daily life.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
That's great. So we have some questions about from individuals who have issues with knee area and the hips.
Could I just go quickly and switch the lights on? It's getting dark now.
Oh, please. Okay, go ahead.
It's getting at 5 o'clock. Well, it's nearly 6 o'clock here in the UK. I'll just switch the lights.
While you do that, I'll quickly answer a question from Hillary. She says, I have had issues with physical therapists wanting to show certain results within a specific time frame because insurance won't pay unless they are able to show that I'm improving. So the regulations around physical therapy and insurance reimbursement changed a few years ago to this, and usually Medicare leads it, and the insurers usually follow the lead of Medicare, where they accept ongoing physical therapy for maintenance. And we have some sample letters on our website that you can use to contest an insurance company if they reject that claim. But it's a hassle. But it's no longer grounds for discontinuing physical therapy if you're not improving. The idea that it's important for maintenance has been accepted. So.
But this is generally a problem, and this is a problem in the UK as well, that if you have a condition which improves, that is much, providers are much more happy to pay for that.
Yeah.
Where you are looking at maintaining, and there is a progression, and you look at maintaining, that is where things are getting really tricky. And this is, for me, one of the so wonderful things working for a charity where we don't discharge and where we actually put the person at the center of our therapies. It's, for me as a therapist, just a really, really nice environment to work for. I used to work in the NHS before, and I had endless discussions and arguments with my managers who wanted me to discharge people and to move on in the waiting list, and were not accepting that maintenance work is important. Mm-hmm. And it's tricky, and it's always cheaper not to pay.
Mm-hmm. That's
Unfortunately.
unfortunately, yes, we have these gatekeepers trying to getting between care we need and
Yeah.
just and often for people who are vulnerable, like who has time and energy to fight them when you're trying to live with a chronic condition. It's just sad. But anyway, there's a question. Let's make sure we address the knee and hip, and then someone else was asking about lower issues.
What was the question about the knee and the hip then?
Nancy, could you elaborate on that if you come off mute?
Okay, sure. This is an ongoing problem, and I've been to a physical therapist about my knee, and he gave me certain exercises, and that improved. But it is when I walk or if I exercise on a small stair stepper, it's not a heavy duty one, but my knee starts to hurt on the outside of it. And it can go up into my hip and also my groin muscle. So I don't know. I was just, June had asked, where do you have your problems? And that is right now a focus of mine, because that's, even when we did the exercises last time, for some reason, my groin muscle just gets aggravated. It doesn't hurt, but, and so at first I thought it was stretches that were making it hurt, but I do sit like a lot. So I had started to do the stretches, but I just find that I think the whole left side of my front, from my hips down to my knee is a problem area.
Yeah. It's a tricky one. And again, I don't have a fabulous answer for that. What you're describing to me at the moment, I hear from it that it's not just when you're standing and weight bearing, but when you're also just sitting or moving. So knee problems on weight bearing, I would always want to have a look in what position the knee is when you put your weight through. Because of the weakness around the hip, lots of people with FSHD or with other neuromuscular conditions lock their knee backwards. So they are hyperextending their knee. Their knee is jamming backwards because the muscles supporting the knee are not strong enough to actually give the support required. If the knee is jamming back, then the knee is very vulnerable because it's basically hanging onto its ligaments rather than having the muscular support. If that would be the case, definitely need to see a one-to-one therapist to see if there is a chance of getting the muscles more active, and otherwise possibly considering an external knee support. I would always start lightly with just a neoprene Velcro, something to give a little bit of external support to make the knee a bit slower in jamming back. It doesn't stop it jamming back, but it just makes it a little bit slower and a little bit less violent for the knee. So that's when the knee is hyperextending, and especially during weight bearing. If it is more of a muscle pulling pain which goes up towards the hip, especially when you say you're sitting a lot, Nancy, I would be always wondering about muscle length. And that would be the inner thigh muscle, it will be the hip flexor muscles on the front, but also the hip muscles, so the buttock muscles. We've got the glute max, which are the big ones sitting straight over the buttock, and then we've got the sideways muscles as well. And these sideways muscles are often responsible for some lower back or hip pain as well. So flexibility would be the next thing I really would look for. Especially when sitting often and having a lot and having weak core muscles, you are probably tilting your pelvis forward a lot, and that makes the hip extend less. So the hip is in a permanent flexed position, and that gives the muscles on the front of the hip and on the inner side, the short muscles, the chance to really tighten up and seize up. That, I would say, out of experience, is another common culprit for pain around the hip. But at the end, online, Nancy, I have no idea what's going on for you. But I would definitely say work with a therapist and have muscle lengths and alignment checked out and see if there is anything which can be found on. Sometimes hip pain, knee pain is just a simple osteoarthritis, wear and tear. From the age of 25 onwards, we are deteriorating. Unfortunately, that's just what's happening. And but sometimes it's FSHD aggravated because of posture positioning weakness. And if you are able to make it more tolerable by stretching, working on core stability, working on posture, then that would at least help you to not have the pain all the time. Does that make sense, Nancy?
Yes, thank you. It does. Especially when you're talking about sitting, and I have my posture is just terrible. So I can totally understand. And I also wanted to mention, since you don't read the chats, that I really appreciated when we were doing the exercises last week, your constant reminder to, where your hips and shoulders are supposed to be, and, are you still breathing, and all those things, because every time you said it, I was not doing what I was supposed to be doing. And that's what makes me nervous about exercising, because I know that I throw my body a different way than it should. So thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. June,
Okay. Chris had a question, which you may have addressed or not. I just want to make sure. She mentions her lower back is usually the most aggravated part for her. Chris, do you want to say anything more about that? Chris, you'd have to come off mute.
I'm trying to find the mute button.
Got it.
There we go. Yeah, so I would just say that for me, it used to be my shoulders and neck, and I feel like I've been able to do enough flexibility there that I've been able to kind of keep that at bay for the most part. I mean, not always, but better than it used to be. But my lower back seems to be the thing now that is sort of my Achilles heel. And I'll feel it, when I'm sleeping. So I try to use a leg pillow when I start feeling it. Sitting down, getting up, all kinds of different ways of feeling lower back.
Do you feel your lower back mostly when you have been still for some time and then you start changing the position and moving? Is that when the lower back pain comes on or stiffness comes on?
No, it doesn't seem to be correlated to that. It seems to be, I don't know. It's sort of, it could be activity related, and it could also be in use related. So it kind of happens in both scenarios.
Yeah. So if that's okay, I'll give a little bit of a longer answer again. That seems to be the story of my life. So lower back pain, there is something which is called a simple lower back pain, which is the stiffness and the ache we're experiencing when we have been sitting for some time and then we start getting up. And then once we're moving, things are getting a little bit easier again. And this simple lower back pain doesn't mean that it's not painful. Is usually caused by muscle tightness. We are seizing up as we are still, and then we start moving and our body is moaning and groaning, and can be quite painful as well, but that usually responds well to when we are moving. And that type of back pain, definitely moving, definitely stretching, and definitely core stability and posture work. Now, the other back pain we see, or I see quite often with my patients, is they're doing all right when they're starting off, and then as the day goes on, it all starts to get more and more achy, and then put in a little bit of standing on the spot or standing still, and it all gets really achy. And this is the back pain which comes in when the muscles are getting really tired and fatigued, and your whole system is not holding up very well against gravity anymore. So for some people, that might be Mike, it starts then feeling that the neck is starting to get really painful because the neck muscles are holding on for dear life. And for some people, it's that the back is starting to hurt because the whole system just collapses. Core muscles can't keep you up anymore, and you're hanging in your ligaments, and you're putting a lot of pressure into your structures, basically, and they start to complain. If that is the case, I would go firstly encouraging the core muscles, working on your posture, but then also look at pacing. If you feel that by the end of the day, you're aching more and more, have a look if you can vary a little bit more your posture. Can you sit down in between? Can you find pockets where you can do some core exercises to just remind these core muscles, even when they're getting tired, to switch on a little bit again? Can you loosen up the tight areas a little bit to help you to keep going a little bit longer? So I think the key word there for me would be pacing and trying to break up activities a little bit rather than doing a big chunk of activities, and see if that helps you to last longer, so that you last until the evening, until you have your rest.
That's good feedback. Can I ask one other question while I have you? Thank you. I tweaked my knee. I don't know, I rotated incorrectly getting something out of the car, and it's just been tweaky for a couple of weeks. You mentioned that for us with FSHD, it takes 4 times as long to heal. So I've been wearing a brace when it gets really achy.
Sorry, just to interrupt, not the healing, which takes 4 times as long, but the normal muscle build-up takes 4 times as long generally, but if you have a muscle wasting condition, you are looking at a very different time scale. So the healing process shouldn't really be affected, but if we're looking at building up strength, you are looking at a long-term approach rather than a 6 weeks or 8 weeks program.
Okay, that's why I was asking the question, because I wasn't sure if that was related to that. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, if your knee is after the injury not getting better, you definitely need to have it looked at. If you feel it's definitely improving, but it just is slow,
right,
that's probably okay. But, if in doubt, always have it checked out.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions? We're kind of reaching the end of our time. Well, while you're thinking about that, I'm going to put Ruth on the spot because I see her. Hi, Ruth.
I,
She is
Hello.
the
Sorry I
brilliant
was late.
dynamo who kind of is very involved with the muscle, the center. And do you want to say
Yes.
a few words about that, or just about your own experience of, having therapists who know what's going on with FSHD and the difference it's made for you?
Yes. Hi, everyone. And hi, June and Ulrike. I'm so sorry I was late. Yes, I think when I first started, as a trustee at the center, I kind of knew exercise and physical therapy would be beneficial, but I think I thought, well, I have a FSH or MD, and there's not much you can do. So actually, in the course of working at the center and kind of developing and growing this charity, I have learned so much from our therapists and other service users about how much can be done, both functionally and even, mentally and emotionally. Just the feeling that there is, you're not helpless, and that you can, with the right support, really maximize your function, and also just having that support is so critical. So I would encourage everyone to, while you may not have a center like ours in the UK, I think it is beneficial to find someone and kind of who would be interested. And I think don't get discouraged if you find someone who isn't interested. There is someone out there, like we have found at our center, physios who care, and once they get past that initial reticence or just like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I think, as Ulrike has told me before, it's not a matter of our physios having different skills than other physios. It's really the application of their skills and knowing how to, or getting the experience of how to apply it. So what I would say is it's absolutely beneficial to me to be getting the physio that I do, particularly as my FSH progresses. I'm in the chair full time now. I get very stiff, and I've been away for 2 months from the center. I'm really feeling it, even though I'm doing my stretches, Ulrike, and trying and getting my husband to help out. But still, having the physios who can support you and help you recognize when you're compensating, unconsciously, and being able to focus on the core and not, unconsciously using my bringing other stronger muscles into play, and being able to isolate those muscles are really, really beneficial to maintaining your function. So I hope that helps a little. I could go on and on, but I know we're limited time. Anyway, it's absolutely been eye-opening for me to see how much can be done, and with the right support, how much further I can go with it.
Thank you, Ruth. Well, the UK community is really lucky to have people like you. So if there are other questions, you can always send them my email. I have a feeling this will not be the last time we'll be seeing Ulrike. I think she's proven herself to be an invaluable resource for all of us. So thank you so much for attending today's Feeling Fit. And
well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you for all you do. We'll be posting this on YouTube, and the other one from 2 weeks ago is already up. So those of you who missed that can go back and look it up, and onward. So everybody have a wonderful rest of your day.